Hello and welcome to Trad Jazz Today. Dan Zeilinger has been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of his most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at the Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. Dan has met many people during his career and has spent many hours on and off stage with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. They all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, Dan will be sharing them with you. Now, Dan Zeilinger.
Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is somebody who I should have met a long time ago. We're from the same city. We both went to high school in Huntington Beach, although I went to Marina. He went to Huntington High. And we both went to Golden West College a couple of years apart. And I'm sure that we probably came close to hitting each other on the freeway with that kind of record.
Yeah.
But here he is now all the way from Pine Top, Lakeside, Arizona, Mr. Rob Wright. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Dan.
Good to finally meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For some reason, fate has been keeping us apart.
It is strange how you can live so near somebody and run in the same circles and never run into each other. I mean, we both know a lot of the same musicians, but I don't.
Ta-da. That's kind of what we had. Well, I never played at Disney. I didn't do the hotel or the park, and I was actually in Knott's for a long time. But
okay.
Anyway, so what I like to do with these interviews is talk people through their musical lives.
Okay.
So let's start with, where were you born?
I was actually born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. My dad was in the Army, and so my mom and dad got married, and then I showed up just about exactly 9 months later.
I was an Army brat as well, by the way. You understand the term. That's just anybody who's born into the military service and ends up yanking up roots every 2 or 3 years, going somewhere else.
Well, my dad only did I think a 2-year stint. So after a year, when I was a year, we moved back to California. And so I don't really remember much of North Carolina.
And that's when you settled in Huntington?
No, we moved back to Southgate.
Oh.
And my great grandparents actually owned the Southgate ranch, big part of Los Angeles, and they lost a lot of it during the Depression. But that my family was, both my parents were from Southgate, so we moved there first, and then we moved to Downey when Dad, started making a little more money. Moved up to Downey, then we moved to Fountain Valley.
Whoa, okay.
When it was nothing but strawberry fields. Yeah,
that's about when we hit Huntington Beach. You remember when what's now the Westminster Mall used to be a goldfish farm? I don't know if you off the 405 there.
At Westminster Mall, did you say?
Uh-huh.
I do not remember that.
There used to be a Japanese deer park on Beach Boulevard and a goldfish farm on Golden West.
I used to ride my bike to the Golden West Mall when we were in Fountain Valley. Then we moved to Huntington Beach when I was a sophomore in high school.
Whereabouts in Huntington, just out of curiosity?
Where?
Yeah, whereabouts in Huntington? Which neighborhood?
Do you remember Huntington Seacliff?
Sure. My wife is from the harbor.
Okay, well, we lived at Golden West and right by the high school. Actually, I used to to school off Golden West Boulevard there, about 0.5 of a mile from the ocean.
Now, when did you start your musical endeavors?
Well, it's a little serendipitous. When I was 10 years old, my father was watching football with a neighbor who was a salesman and had won a banjo in a sales contest. And he tried to get his daughter to learn and to take lessons, and she didn't want to. She didn't like it. So the two of them were drinking beer, watching football, the Rams, and they decided that I should be the one to learn how to play the banjo.
Enough beer to do that, yeah.
Well, and it was funny. My dad put this big sales pitch on me. You got to learn to play the banjo, and then you can play at parties, and you'll be really popular. That's what he told me. I said, okay, Dad. and I loved music. I loved to sing. So I would have, anything he would have encouraged me to play, I would have played. But the banjo is what I had. So.
Well, you were singing before that then?
I did. I used to sing. I used to put on my dad's old records. I love the Al Jolson records, and I'd sing along and dance around. And so that's probably what helped the banjo stick. It wasn't that I was so attracted to the banjo, but I like those songs.
Sure.
The old Dixieland and 1920s and even the
Swanee and the Jolson hits.
Yeah, I loved it. I love those songs. So those fit right in with the banjo.
I'm Just Wild About Harry. What were his other big hits? All those.
Mammy and
yeah.
And Rosie, My Posey, and
quite a showman.
Yes.
Well, nifty. So you didn't go through the music department at Huntington High then?
You know what? That's a funny. I wanted to be in the band in 5th grade, which is about when I started playing the banjo, and they tested us for our aptitude, and they told me I didn't have any aptitude, so I couldn't be in the band.
Oh no.
So actually, when I was a senior in high school, I went to the band director and said, I want to start a band. I want to start a Dixieland band.
That was Gary Gilmore then, wasn't it? Or was it
no, what was his name?
The later one. Probably Gary Gilbo? No?
Vogel? Was his name Vogel?
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to remember his first name.
So I went to him and he said,
Kurt Vogel. Kurt Vogel. I was trying to remember his name.
So I went to him and said, do you have any players here that want to play Dixieland? And he said, you know what? I know some kids that graduated 2 years ago that have they're doing that, and that's who you should contact. So I contacted them as a gentleman named Dan Reed, and they had a trumpet and a clarinet, and a piano player, but he was in college down in San Diego. So anyway, we started a band, and we got a guy that went to Fountain Valley High School named Joe McCullough. He played bass, and we didn't have any drums. Dan would just stand and hit the pedals with his foot as he was playing the clarinet. We later added a girl drummer who went to high school with me. Her name was Cassie Croning, and that was it. We practiced, and our first gig I was the student body president. So I somehow, because of that, had met the mayor of Huntington Beach, and she hired us for our first gig. I think we each got $10. We knew about 5 songs.
No, of course. That's really cool.
We also sang barbershop.
Well, I saw that I tried to research the people I talked to, and I saw that you did barbershop. Yeah.
We sang barbershop, and those days, we'd go out and we'd do one of our little gigs, and then we'd go to Bob's Big Boy afterwards and get a hamburger, and we'd usually sing some song to the waitress in barbershop, and they were embarrassed to death, and we were kind of idiots, but that was my start in music. I started playing, I told you, when I was 10, started taking lessons, and Howard Alden and I took lessons back to back from the same man when we were 10 years old.
So you started on plectrum?
It was a 5-string. I didn't even know what a plectrum was, but my teacher didn't teach 5-string. He taught plectrum, and nobody, most people don't know the difference. They say, oh, my son wants to learn the banjo, and so they said, all right, you start at 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, and.
I remember Howard telling me about that teacher. I guess, wasn't he actually a guitar? Was he a guitar player or was he a banjo player? I guess he was a guitar player.
He played everything, and he taught everything in the store. And what was incredible was he would just write out a lead sheet, and then he would write the tab in. He didn't use anything for reference, but he would do it for Howard with the tenor banjo, and he'd do it for me on my plectrum. He had violin students, guitar students. He was just a good musician. He was, played in the speakeasies and things, I think, in the 1920s, and he seemed ancient to us. but he was super nice and he was very, very encouraging. And so he gave us both a really good start.
So you were kind of rubbing elbows with Howard back then.
We knew each other. I was intimidated by him because he was so darn good. And, you know, I watched him play at Disneyland and around town. I was mostly playing baseball at that time. I was a baseball player. The banjo was kind of a also thing. And so I never joined any banjo bands. I never was into that scene at all. When I moved to Tucson when I was in college, and I started playing at a place called the Gaslight Theater, which still exists today. And they did melodrama, and they had piano and banjo. And that was my first full-time gig, you know, where 5 or 6 nights a week that I played. And I did that for a couple of years. Then I moved back to California thinking of, you know, to try to make it as a musician there. And I struggled mightily, but I finally got on with the new Christy Minstrels, and that's. Were
you on the band the same time as Igor Glenn?
No, Igor was before me, just a few years before me. But I know Igor, and we have performed some of those old songs together at some festivals. But that was really what taught me how good you need to be, you know, to do concerts and shows.
Before we get too far here, just for my own curiosity, what was your baseball position?
I was a pitcher.
Wow.
In fact, I thought I was going to play baseball. I loved playing the banjo, but I thought I was going to play baseball. And I just graduated from high school, and I was going to go play at Golden West because I was not a very good student, honestly. I don't know if I could have gotten into a college.
They were a pretty good baseball team.
They did have a good baseball team, and a lot of the guys on my high school team went there, and so we were expecting me to go, and I just injured my ankle so bad I couldn't walk.
Oh no!
Run, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to play the banjo. That's kind of what that was. That simple.
So how long were you with the new Christy Minstrels?
Probably, I think it was about 14 months. It was the end of 1980. We rehearsed like for 6 weeks in November and December. Then we went on tour, and we were on tour. I mean, it was brutal. You played 6 or 7 nights a week in different towns, all over the country.
Oh yeah, they were hardcore tour people.
I played every state except for Hawaii with them, and then I later played Hawaii with my wife. So I played all 50 states. That's kind of, I'm sort of proud of that. It's kind of unique. But then I finished in early 1982. So I think it was about 14 months. And I got to tell you, we were on the road the whole time. And so it was just that I'd had enough. I'd learned, I thought, what I needed to learn. Then I actually went back to Long Beach, and that's when I started working at that summer at the Disneyland Hotel, I think it was.
Oh yeah, well it was although it was difficult, I'm sure that's one of the things that young musicians really need to understand is the professionalism that it takes to do something like that. You know, I don't think it's included in our education packages very much in universities.
No, and it's a weak spot for a lot of good musicians is to conducting yourself as a professional. But that was a really fun gig, as you can imagine, all summer at the Disneyland Hotel. In fact, and then when I left the Christies, I wanted to work at Disneyland, and I actually went to one of their auditions, and they told me, we think you're really good, but we don't need a banjo player.
You played for Stan Freeze, I take it. Or whoever those.
I don't know who they were. It was a committee of like 3 people.
Yeah.
It probably was. It was the woman was the one who told me, we think you're really good, but we don't need a banjo player. And then I went and auditioned another time, and they didn't hire me, and I couldn't imagine why they didn't hire me. And I think I finally found out they hired Paul Scavarda.
Uh-huh. In fact, that's really funny you mentioned Paul, because I have him coming up, I think, the next couple of weekends for an interview.
He's a great guy. He's so fun to play with, and I don't blame them for hiring him. That was probably a good choice. A lot of the banjo players were technically better. Oh, I'm sorry. My brother's
That's all right.
If I could turn it off. A lot of the banjo players at that time were better players than I was. I was always more of an entertainer and a singer. I did develop my banjo playing as I went along. As my musicianship got better, I stopped taking shortcuts and started dotting my I's and crossing my T's, and actually wound up playing more guitar than banjo and singing. So it was banjo first, which is rare. Usually people are guitar first and then banjo, but now I enjoy playing anything.
Well, not in the circles I travel in, but I understand. You know, a lot of banjo players, a lot of people that I know just because I'm a tuba player, were banjo first and guitar second, or at least equal with the two.
Well, yeah. Whenever I sell myself short, Ray Templin always reminds me, yeah, Rob, there's a lot of good banjo players, but they don't sing and they don't tell jokes. So
I love Ray. Man, he's a great guy. I don't know if you've noticed, he's now the voice of my channel.
I did notice that. Good for you.
He offered actually, which only tells me that I wasn't doing a very good job. So
you need help.
Exactly. That's what the phone call was. You know, I do this for a living, Dan. So.
Oh, that was a good impression. I had a radio show for a few years for my financial advisory business, and I used to do radio skits, and Ray was my guy. He did all these different voices, and it was really a kick. In fact, if you go to his website and see the voices, a lot of those are from my radio show that he used.
Yeah, I actually pitched a show to him with him and I. I wanted to interview jazz greats from the past, and have him do the voices. He goes, not what I'm up to right now. So, but if I say, if you have a talented friend, by all means, try to take advantage of it.
Yes, that's what friends are for, to take advantage of it.
So you buckled down and so decided to get really serious about your banjo playing. Is that where we were?
With the Christies, they hired me to basically play. They basically hired me to play a big, really fancy, flashy banjo solo.
Oh, okay.
And so, and the banjo is their logo. But I played only banjo on about a third of the song, so I had to learn to play the guitar. I learned to play the guitar when I was with the Christies in the 6 weeks that we had before we started our tour. I had literally practiced until my fingers bled. They cracked, you got big calluses and then they cracked and bled, and people use that as sort of a saying. I practiced till my fingers bled. Well, I actually did, and I got real solid because anything short of really good was not acceptable with those guys, and so I learned all the chords all the way up and down the neck, and I'm really glad I did that, because I've probably until I started playing with the Wildcats, which was about 2004, I made far more money playing the guitar than I did playing the banjo.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my wife and I decided to move. We lived in Big Bear, and I didn't play very much there at all when we lived up there. I did some bars for a while, but then I decided to get a regular job, and I worked for a number of years in managing ski shops up there. And then we moved to Tucson, and about a year and a half after I moved to Tucson, a young man, sounded like I thought he was a college kid, called me up and said, "Hey, I'm from the U of A, Arizona, and we're starting a traditional jazz band, and we heard that you're a real banjo player." And I'm like, "How old are you?" He said, "Well, we're professors." And so that's what started the Wildcats, and they were the professor of saxophones, the low brass professor, a graduate student on trombone, a trumpet player was a graduate student, and the drummer was a graduate student. And so this was like an experiment for them. They were chamber musicians. So
Aha! That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that was really unusual for those positions to be held by jazz guys.
They were such good players. And I thought, I told them, you guys, I don't care if you even get a gig. I'll just come and play with you because it's fun to play with such good players. They had no idea what they were doing. We started they transcribed songs from the Hot 5 and Hot 7. And I don't know if you have any of our albums. If you don't,
I haven't.
I'll send you some MP3s. Just fabulous recordings. Stuff that
great. Thank you.
Jason Carter is one of the top trumpet players of his generation, and he joined us for a few years, and we did some really good albums of extremely difficult stuff. And that was after Ray joined us. The musicianship for a time was just really, really good. That was when we were doing a lot of festivals and things. And then Jason wound up getting hired on by Yanni. He couldn't turn it down because he paid him so much. And then we struggled for a while, and we finally found Rick Perone. He's a good, solid trumpet player, and now the band's back to doing well. And we've done a lot and sold a lot of records over the last 18 years.
It's interesting. Arizona has become a destination for early jazz players. You guys have got a heck of a bunch of talent there now.
Well, it's funny because Ray and I both thought the same thing when he moved here. I thought, well, I guess I'm leaving California. I guess I'll just play by myself in my room, and I'm not going to be part of a big music scene. But Tucson has a really big music scene. There's a lot of really great players, and there's a lot up in Phoenix too. It's a big city, so that was a pleasant surprise for both of us, and especially it was a pleasant surprise to meet each other. We have another mutual friend named Evan Dane, who's from Northern California. He lives in Tucson, and he played with Banu and played a number of years in New Orleans. And when Ray moved to Tucson, he hooked up with Evan because they used to play with Banu together. And then, Evan said, you need to meet this guy, Ray Temple. And so I called him up, and I came over and brought my banjo, and we sat down, and it was like love at first sound. It was his time is so good. We just loved it. And we've been really, really good friends ever since. We've done lots of projects. We've made some music videos. We were opening act for Barnaby, who was
Sure.
You remember Barnaby?
Yeah.
He passed away a few years ago, but we still talk about him, and we still laugh at his jokes. That was a fun thing. And then we did a pizza parlor sing-along album just for fun. We've done a lot of projects.
Yeah, Ray's great. Excuse me. One of those. Anyway, super. And so the Wildcats have been going for how long now?
2004. And first we just kind of transcribed some tunes and we'd listen to a song, and the trumpet player was a graduate student and had a harder time with the improv part, but the role is really to play the melody during
Sure.
the ensemble part. But Dr. Kellen Thomas was soprano saxophone, and he was marvelous at improv. And then the Doug Teidebeck, the original trombone player, was also really good at improv. And so they did most of that. And then I could do solos on the banjo. That was not an issue. And then we replaced Doug Teidebeck with Rob Boone, a local Tucson guy who's played all over the world with, on the cruise lines and all that. And so he is also very good improvisational. And so, but the Kelly Thomas, the tuba player, who was a professor of tubas, I couldn't play a note if it wasn't written down. Amazingly, he had a doctor and he could play anything. In fact, tell you a funny story. He wanted to have for one of our albums, he wanted Rob Boone to write him a solo to play. And Rob was kind of bent out of shape. He's like, why don't you do your own solo, you know? So Rob wrote him a solo that was impossible to play.
And he played it.
He played it. And we were all in on the joke. And we're like, man, how? And he didn't know when he was done. He said, that was really hard. But incredible. Then Kelly took the low brass position at Tennessee, and we replaced him with Evan Dane playing the string bass. And then we stopped doing all the arrangements. Then we became a real traditional jazz band. We just had a roadmap, and we played and follow each other. And that's I liked it the first rendition of the band because we did such difficult tunes, songs like Symphonic Raps and The Snake Rag, and we did them like the original recordings.
Sure.
But now it's more expressive, I think, when you're kind of running a motion offense, like to use a basketball analogy, where you just follow each other.
Well, yeah, I think the ideal situation is when you do a combination of both. When
it is.
When you get to know each other so well that nobody can tell what you're doing, whether or not that was written down, you know.
We have Greg Varlotta did an arrangement of Sweet Georgia Brown that was way out there, and we did that. We played his arrangement, but then when they did the solos, they just did their own thing, and that was fun. That was not only really hard, but we also had all of our improv on that. And
but did he teach you how to tap dance?
Yeah, actually, he showed me some steps, and I've been working on them for about 6 or 8 years, and I'm still.
He's got a new how-to book and method out now. I interviewed him, and we ended up plugging that book quite a bit.
He's played with us quite a bit over the years, because he can play anything.
Oh God, yes.
He knows all the old trad jazz songs, so he's my favorite sub. It's not like having a sub; it's just like having a guest artist, and he plays trumpet and trombone equally well. And he was at my house one day, and he picks up my Martin D35, and he played it better than I did. I was almost angry.
It's interesting because you find that pretty often in this style of music, and I've had this discussion many times on the channel with guys who it just comes out of not knowing who you're going to get for the gig, and so these guys who are so talented learn how to play everything just to fill the spot for the gig,
Yeah, in fact, two of my guys in the Wildcats can play two positions, and that really helps. I move one over and move somebody else someplace else, and I maybe only need, one sub where I might have needed,
Have you ever toyed with string bass or something?
What about string bass?
Have you ever tried it?
Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, I mean, that's a physical machine. It's like wrestling a bear, I think. But
no, I agree. For a while, I was actually carrying both to gigs, both a tuba and a string bass, and I learned not to do that after about a year.
Interesting anecdote for you. In 2000, after I joined the Wildcats, I felt like I wanted a better banjo. I had an old Gibson PB800, and it was just kind of dead. It didn't, it was not very loud, and I got it in my head I needed a new banjo. So I called up. I determined that Ohm and Richelieu were the top banjo makers at the time in the country. And so I called them up and said, can I fly to your factory and try, all your banjos and buy one? And the gentleman from Ohm said, well, you know what? There's a big convention coming up in a few weeks. Why don't you go there? It's a banjo convention. and everybody will be there. Not only that, but there'll be vintage banjos. You can try everything you want. I had no idea this world existed. So I went to this thing in Peoria, Illinois, and I made what turned out to be a bunch of lifetime friends. I did buy a ridiculously expensive banjo.
What did you get?
I got an Ohm, like knee plus ultra gold plated thing.
Howard likes Ohm. That's his brand.
Yes. Well, they're hard to beat. They're really well made and they play easy. I now use a 1964 Vega Deluxe.
No, not a Vox, a Deluxe.
It's a Vox, Vega Vox
Okay.
Deluxe. And it's as good a banjo as I've ever heard or played. I love it. I did not need one but when you run across something like that, as you know, you're like, I have to have this.
Plus, it makes it a lot easier to change heads. But
I don't do that. So I met a young Tyler Jackson. He was 18 years old and he was already a phenom. And I like to think that I mentored him, not in how to play, because he was already a virtuoso player at 18, but in what to play and how to present it. I used to have him perform with me at the conventions and try to model for him, how to carry yourself. And then so we became just very good friends. I always call him little brother. He's really more like my son's age, but we became very good friends. We've always enjoyed playing together. And then Howard Alden moved back to Arizona, to Phoenix, and he reached out to me. I had run into Howard at a banjo festival in Northern California like 6 years ago. So we at least got sort of reacquainted from when we were kids. We
Sure.
this and that. Well, Howard reaches out and he says, "Hey, Rob, do you know Tyler Jackson?" This is an email. I said, "Yeah, I know Tyler Jackson. He's a really good friend of mine." He said, "Do you think that he would want to come to Arizona and we could do like a Banjo Summit? The three of us could just get together and play our banjos?" I said, "I don't know. I'll ask him." So I emailed Tyler. I said, "Tyler, Howard Alden asked me if you would like to come to Arizona and the three of us, play our banjos." And Tyler went, "Howard Alden, he's one of my idols. I love Howard Alden." I said, "Okay, well, what works for you?" So we picked the date in April. And when Howard was in between, when Howard's traveling, and same thing with Tyler. And so we met at my house. And in the meantime, I said, "Well, if you guys are coming, do you want me to get us some gigs?" And they're like, "Yeah, heck yeah." Because it was going to be for a week or 5 days or something. So I have enough contacts from the Wildcats and the other things that I do that I was able to get us 3 gigs. And so we met, we played, and those guys, they didn't stop they went all their waking hours. They jammed. I finally got tired. I got a bourbon and went in the living room and watched TV. My fingers were tired. My ears were sore. They went at it, and they went at it for days and days. And then we did the concerts, and we've done a couple more sets of those since then. We were due to do a bunch of them last year, and they got canceled for obvious reasons. But I thought that's a fun story, because Tyler's like, "Oh, Howard Alden."
It's funny how much of his name you made on string bass, isn't it, with Tyler?
Yeah. In fact, I wish he lived in Tucson. But his family's all in Texas. But I'd love to have him in the band.
Boy, they're having some weather down there now, aren't they?
What?
The weather in Texas.
Oh gosh, yeah, they're freezing. It's awful. It's just one of my friends in Texas. His name is Larry Reed, and he's a guitar player and singer. And he has all electric. Everything's electric, no gas. And so the power is out, and they had no heat. So he was using a propane tank to heat the house, a propane heater, and he was almost out of propane. And there was a 1.5 foot of snow outside, so he couldn't go anywhere because there's no snowplows in the state of Texas. What a horrible mess.
Craziness. I know. In fact, I guess they were colder than Canada here lately. So
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, you know what? I'm I'm an old guy, so I remember lots of times when the weather got really goofed up. Do you remember in 1969?
It's snowing. When we had snow in Huntington Beach.
Were you in California?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Fountain Valley flooded. People were riding boats, motorboats down the street, and the water was, the houses were built up quite a bit. The water was almost up to the houses, but
people were water skiing down Main Street in Huntington.
Yes, and that stayed for most of the winter. There was a big field where they were doing construction, and they had to stop. And we called it the lake. We would go play at this lake. It was there all winter long, and that was 1969. And my friend, when I moved to Big Bear, I talked to one of my friends, and what happened up there was they got out of that storm something like 10 or 12 feet of snow, and it shut down the mountain. They had to helicopter food into them up there in 1969.
Yeah, that was my freshman year at Marina, so I remember that.
Okay. Yeah, I was
You're a bit younger than I.
Yeah, what was I, in 1969? I was only, 10, 11 years old. So I thought it was great. We built rafts and floated down the street.
Yeah, well, yeah. In fact, that neighborhood, if you were still down by Seabreeze, that all would have been underwater.
Yeah, I don't know if it was built in 69, was it?
That might have been marshland still. I don't remember.
Our house I think it was marshland. My house was built there in probably about 73 or 4.
Well, half of Sunset Beach used to get washed away constantly, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I know. Huntington Harbor had some issues. Remember, the water would go right across the Pacific Coast Highway. And
by the way, I should tell you, there's a Facebook group called "You Grew Up in Huntington Beach When."
Really?
Yeah, and we exchange old pictures and talk about things like Hungry Joe's and the Golden Bear. And
so, how many times did you try to drive home at night in December when it was so foggy that you couldn't see anything?
Well, those cabbage fields by Marina several times I'd come home from football games where I had to sit on the front fender of my brother's car and tell him where the line was.
We were driving back to my friend's house, and we finally just stopped. We couldn't see anything, and we got out and we're talking, and we hear a voice say, "Who is that?" It was another friend of ours, and he was on his motorcycle, and he had stopped because we couldn't. There was 2-foot visibility.
Yeah, people don't believe me when I talk about those foggy days in Huntington. It's crazy. And my wife, like I said, was a Harvard kid, so we'd be out in the middle of the boat parade in Huntington Harbor.
I used to play for that every year. I played for my first gig I told you was for Harriet Weeder, the mayor, and it was for the boat parade.
Oh, it was for the boat parade? Yeah, her dad was in the yacht club, and they did that every year. So
wound up doing a lot of things like those for a man named Vince Rue, who lived in Huntington Harbor, and every year after I was with the Christies, and then my wife and I toured for 3 years, so we were really solid. You play 6 nights a week for 3 years in a row.
Sure.
You know your stuff, and we got a lot of casuals because people couldn't believe how good we were, that we were available, to play parties and things. But that was my favorite thing because they pay so much better than playing in clubs.
And the food's better too.
Oh, and we'd always get a private tour of the boat parade afterwards,
Oh yeah. For a while there, I was actually living with my father-in-law and my wife down in the apartment complexes behind Sam's Seafood. If you remember that side of the harbor.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and he had a condominium there with his powerboat moored out, out front.
One of my very first. It was probably 2 or 3 years after that first time I played, and I had the band, and we were playing for Huntington Harbor, and it was I don't remember the name of the people who hired us, but the lady, the hostess, was very gregarious, and she had a big diamond necklace that said BITCH, all studded in diamonds. And so we got to this party, and we brought our girlfriends with us, and they were cute, of course, darling 19-year-old girls. And they put us on a balcony on the second floor, overlooking the harbor. And so we're up there playing and they're giving our girlfriends drinks, and they didn't drink. They were plastered. And then my friend Dan's sister came and brought one of her friends, and she drank so much that she passed out, and the paramedics came.
Oh, no.
So Dan and I picked her up, took her to the car, and took her back to his house. You could imagine his parents were like the Cunninghams, we opened the door, and Dan's got her shoulders, and I've got her legs, and we'd take her, carry her up the stairs. We put her in the bathtub, and then let her friend take care of her. When we got back to the gig, the band had been kicked out. They were out on the curbs waiting for us with all their equipment. And so it was just a disaster. And the next day, Dan called me and said, "Rob, we forgot our hats. We had bought straw hats at Disneyland.
Those aren't cheap."
No, and not in those days for us. And so we were so embarrassed and so scared, and we got the nerve to go up to the front door. We were never going to ask for any money or anything. We just wanted to get our hats back. And she answers the door, and she's like, "Hi, boys. Oh, it's up. Just a minute. I'll get you your check for you." We're like, we kind of looked at each other like, "What? Okay." And we stood out on the porch, and she goes and she writes a check, and she goes, "So you guys want to do it again next year?" We said, "Yeah, sure." And we left our hats here. "Oh yeah, let me get those." She gives us our hats, and we to this day don't know if she just forgave us or she was as drunk as everybody else and didn't remember. But none of us ever drank while we were playing after that. We learned a good lesson.
There's a sitcom here, Rob.
So many crazy things happened. I was in Huntington Beach, and we were having a rehearsal at Dan's house, and the doorbell rings, and we open the door, and there's a naked man on the front porch, stark naked. He says, "I'm here for the party." We said, "Well, what party?" He goes, "The party." And was there no one having a party? He says, "I hear the music." I said, "No, well, we're having a band rehearsal." And he tries to walk in the house, and we're stopping him because Dan's sisters are in there. He finally goes walking off, and we called the police, and the police came, and apparently he had a neighbor who was drinking in his hot tub, and just got up and
wanted to join the party.
Oh my, that stuff doesn't seem to happen so much when you grow up, unless you're with Ray.
Yeah, well, very much so. Oh, he still gets those kind of gigs, or it's him naked at your door. One or the other.
We were playing a festival in Penticton up in Canada, and they put you up in these old motels, and the walls are like paper thin, right? And he's in the room next to mine. And I walk inside, I set down my banjo, and I sneezed, and my phone rings immediately. I pick up the phone, he says, "Gesundheit." Yes. Oh.
Ray used to do what he used to do to me all the time is he would wait till I was on my way up to the stage with usually with a misbehaving jazz band or one of those guys. And he would come up to me, pull me aside, and tell me the filthiest joke I'd ever heard right before I got on stage. And I wouldn't be able to play. I'd be laughing for the next 5 minutes, and he'd just be sitting in the audience, laughing at me, laughing at him.
He's really fun, and he's always he's very humble, and he always acts like he's so grateful to play with everybody. And
every time he talks, I feel like I'm standing in line at Disney. However, so ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. Yeah,
he's on several of the rides. He does.
Yes, he is.
Several of those rides.
Yeah. Plus, he's the voice of the pirate on the Caribbeans. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew about the Stromboli.
Yeah. In the Pinocchio ride, yeah. Ari mateys, that's him. So what can I say? Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything you'd like to plug? I give you the floor to promote anything you have that you'd like to plug.
Well, gosh, there's not a lot on the books. So I'm looking forward to. I spend winters in Tucson and play a lot with the Wildcats. Our website is wildcatjazz.com. Want to see what we're doing and what we're up to. And then in the summer, I'm up here in Pine Top. We're just happen to be up here this week for my granddaughter's birthday. And I do an act up here where I use a sequencer arranger and with these MIDI files, and
Sure.
I also can play this machine, and I play all kinds of music. I do symphony stuff, big band stuff, and it sounds super pristine. I spent a fortune on sound equipment to get this set up right. And so look for that if you're up in the mountains. It's quite a production.
Where do you do that?
Last year, there's a place up here called the Lion's Den, and they have a big outdoor area with a cantina and off-track bedding and big screen TVs, and then they have a very large stage and lots of seating. And so it's the mountains, so it's outdoors, and it holds hundreds of people. And I was doing that last summer Sundays, and so I hope to do that again this summer. And also would like to do some casuals.
Sure. Do the Wildcats have any product available for listening?
Yes. I also have the Great Banjo Summit and other things with strings that Howard and Tyler and I did.
Oh, there we are.
So,
Okay.
but for those, just contact us on the website, the Great Banjo Summit or Wildcat Jazz, and I can.
Okay, so those aren't going through CD Baby or anything.
They are. You can listen to the music on Spotify, iTunes, all of that. It's everywhere.
But the best way for you would be for them to just obtain it directly from you.
Yeah. And if you want to look the stuff up, we used to be called the original Wildcat Jazz Band, spelled with 2 S's.
Okay.
When we lost Kelland and we lost Kelly and we lost Jason, the band was so different. I changed it to Wildcat Jazz with 2 Z's, just because I didn't want people to think they were going to hear what the original.
Right. It's a different thing now. Correct.
It's a different thing. Very good band, still really popular, very busy. We had a ton lined up for last year, so I expect when things open up, we'll be busy again next year.
Great. Super.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being had. No.
Yeah, I know when I've been had.
At some point in time, I hope we can occupy the same stage maybe in the future.
Yeah, let's hope that happens.
All right, sir. You take care now.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan posts new interviews every Monday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.